Okay, so another question, question 5, is from a 38 Degrees member in Chesham. So our government has reached a deal with the EU. Does that now mean my MP will vote on whether to accept the deal?
Yes, let's just be clear about what the government has accepted. At the moment, it's accepted in principle this text that came out on Wednesday. The EU at the moment, the member states also need to accept that they're happy with it. There are a couple of things that haven't yet been finalised, a couple of kind of square bracketed things. Only if everyone's happy with signing it will you get a signed deal, which is probably a week on Sunday, so the 25th is when that's planned for. At that point, assuming everyone signs, then we have accepted a deal and we have to go through a ratification process. So the UK, again, on constitutional terms, the government can't just sign a deal, a text, and that's binding. Now there's a requirement that there is a parliamentary approval. The government said that Parliament will have to pass a bill to approve and ratify this deal.
Okay.
So the UK has to approve the deal. The member states have a relatively simple vote in the Council of Ministers, and the European Parliament also need to approve it as well. So those are the three bodies that have to give their sign-off of it. So yes, the MP for Chesham is going to have to be involved in that approval process, but the government will have to go through the process of putting together the bill. There's going to be this motion, meaningful vote, all of those kind of things, which have to be got through to do that. So yes, every MP is going to be involved in that, and probably at some length.
Can you tell us a little bit more about meaningful vote and what that means?
It's one of the great mysteries of Brexit studies is quite how meaningful is a meaningful vote going to be. There's going to be some different elements. So there's a motion that the government will bring recommending the deal to Parliament. In that, there's a question about how much Parliament can chop and change, amend what's said in that. But at the end of it, there is a vote on approving and recommending the deal and moving to that formal bit of legislation that has to go with it. So that, I think, is how the government has understood the meaningful vote. We've got to remember that the government's in a slightly difficult position because on the one hand, it has a parliament that can decide more or less what it wants, but this is a vote about a negotiation. So Parliament could say, we make an amendment to this deal where everyone has to get a free hat. Why not? But Parliament can't force the government to get that. It can say, you have to try and go and get that, and if you don't, we won't approve it. But clearly Parliament has to recognise that the government is in a negotiation, so the EU doesn't have to give anything to the UK government who are doing the negotiations. So even if Parliament takes a more active role, and there are some provisions there that if we get to late April and we still haven't got this settled, that Parliament then potentially takes a more active kind of role, faces the same problem, that this is a negotiation. So really, there are limits to how meaningful a meaningful vote can be. That the EU has already said this week that it's not going to go for renegotiation of this text, that the text is the text, and we're not going to have any tinkering going on beyond the things that they know they need to do in the next couple of days. And also, really importantly, any kind of outcome of this that you want to have a negotiated settlement, so anything other than just walking away, all of the stuff that's in that withdrawal agreement, those 600 pages, is about the past, ending the membership, so the liabilities there. So they still will be there if you're leaving, whatever you're leaving for. And then you've got this short political declaration, which I think is going to grow a bit over the next week, which will be an ambition of where we want to go, but is not binding on either party. So you could argue that actually there's not much reason to try and change the withdrawal agreement if you want a negotiated outcome, because you're still going to have the same problems, and the EU is not in the mood to go around tinkering. Whether that's actually how politicians understand it in Westminster, I think we'll find out fairly soon on this.
Yeah, it's a lot of players with a lot of different decision points.
Yeah, and I think, that's one of the reasons why people are interested in talking about these things is that there's so many moving parts, and you can hold some of them still and constant and constrain their impact, but so many things moving at the same time that it's really hard to kind of know and just be sure about what's going to happen. And we're seeing that this week, that I think Number 10 always knew that this was going to be a crunch point. You present a deal, you've got some text, some commitments that you're making, and you can be held to those commitments. Yeah. But quite how it plays out depends a bit on personalities, what's going on, where people see and understand opportunities. So, yeah, if you think about Michael Gove saying today that he's going to stay in government, but he seems to be staying in government because he thinks that if he leaves government, his kind of point of view won't have so much weight around the cabinet table. So he's not staying necessarily because he thinks the deal is super wonderful, but because he thinks it's important to represent. And that's always going to be a challenge. People resigning make a statement, but they also lose their place at the table. And so what power you've got, what power you can have, when can you make your voice heard, when everyone's pushing stuff out, I think it's really fascinating, but it's also really complex and really uncertain in many ways.
Yeah, definitely.